Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ful-on, your Fulham-centric football podcast. And this our first ever live episode. Joining me today is my co-host AJ. How you doing, mate?
I'm all good. I'm all good. It's nice to be here live with the audience.
Yeah, obviously this one we want as much interaction as we can get from people. So please do send us in your questions or your experiences when we're talking about certain subjects. We'll try to share and answer as many of them as we can as we go along. Obviously, we're here to discuss the current ongoings off the field at Fulham at the moment. You know, as much frustration as there is from all of us about ticket pricing and the FST and the FAB and transfer windows and people at the top. There's been
ABCs.
a lot. Yeah, there's been an awful lot of chat amongst absolutely everybody uh, about next steps and how everyone feels. We felt it was about time that we just got together and we facilitated a conversation between everyone. We get to say how we actually feel about a few things. We invite you guys to let us know how you feel about a few things, and then we'll go from there. Really. So let's have a quick sort of deep look into what exactly is going wrong at the moment at Fulham. Ticket pricing and ticket categories is a major issue at Fulham at the minute. We all know that season ticket holders, if you weren't priced out of getting one this season, you're probably quite worried about where we might be standing next year. If you're someone who takes kids, you're worried about how much their tickets prices are going up. And if you're a match day person who doesn't necessarily buy tickets, season tickets, match day prices are through the roof and are ridiculous. And one of the biggest problems with that is the fact that where we used to have a quite sensible ticket category system, that seems to have just completely disappeared out the window at the moment. Been completely swapped with dynamic prices, which has seen match day ticket prices go from £65 to watch Fulham play Man United 4 years ago to £160 to see Fulham play Man United this season. Which led to scenes of an awful lot of Man United fans being in the home ends and people like me who didn't even bother going to the game because I didn't want to sit there being surrounded by Man United fans because I knew it would upset me. AJ, looking at sort of where we're going to start here and what's going wrong, obviously ticket prices and ticket categories is a major issue.
Oh,
You're currently not a season ticket holder, obviously, because you move away and you don't live around at the moment. What has been your experiences around trying to get match tickets, or just are you just completely priced out, especially now you have kids and just the idea of trying to come is sort of pricey as it is?
yeah, the chances of me going to Craven Cottage are few and far between. Like I live in Cambridgeshire now, which all in all isn't that far away. Like I'm talking just over an hour commute maybe if we get the train down into London. But train fares plus the extortionate ticket prices plus the very limited price reductions for kids tickets, the chances of me taking my children are just, yeah, impossible nowadays. When my son has fortunately had the luxury of having a season ticket once, and that's when my season ticket was near enough what 450 quid at the time in the Hammersmith end, and my son's was £75, and for that I could justify it. He was 5 at the time, just getting into football, and it was for 75 quid. If I end up bringing him to 3 or 4 games out of the entirety of the season, it's good value. He'll miss the really cold winter ones, he'll miss the midweek ones, but it's the price you pay for what you get. Now, I believe to get a junior season ticket, we're talking a few £100. The prices have skyrocketed. You can't realistically look to bring more than one child if you do happen to have more than one child, uh, unless you're categorized as one of those fans that the club think we all are, which is, if I'm quoting this right, we turn left on aeroplanes or something like that, which I think is just a
Yeah,
bit remarkably stupid, frankly, to think that the majority of any fan base are that particular type of person. No disrespect if you are that particular type of person, but let's not pretend we're all in the 1% here.
yeah, it's kind of interesting. Paul White has obviously asked how ticket prices are affecting you, and you just explained it for yourself. For
Yeah.
me, ticket pricing is a bit of a touchy subject, because season ticket prices went up a bit of this season, and I mean just about managed to justify having a season ticket this year. with my wife and stuff like that. You know, I'm a father of two. I've got a daughter who's 12 and a son who's just about to turn 5. My daughter's a season ticket holder for 4.5 seasons. You know, she got a half season ticket for Christmas one year. Really liked it because it was really cheap. I think I paid like £49 for a half season ticket one year. You know, next year her full season ticket was like £69, and you know we could justify the fact that even if she didn't go to midweek games or she missed a few games here and there, it was still quite cheap and it was still quite, you know, it was good value for her to go. The problem with that is now is obviously we made the decision last year that she wasn't going to have another one because not that she wasn't really that interested in the sense of like football's do or die for her, but you know she wanted to go to Stagecoach on Saturday, so she did that instead. But the problem is now that my son, who's almost 5, has asked he wants to start coming to games, and I I don't. It's really hard to explain to someone that you can't come because I can't afford it. You know, we have
Mm,
a issue that you know if I wanted to bring him to a game where we sit in the Hammersmith end, you know, you're looking at 50 quid to bring a 5-year-old to football. That's just it's just not good enough. Like you can't afford that. You know, I'm one of
no.
those people. I'm passionate about bringing people over to support Fulham. You know, anyone who knows me knows I've introduced quite a few people to being Fulham fans that maybe didn't go before. You know, there's a few home and away Fulham fans that go now that you know I introduced football to them. My brother Brad, who most people know from going to home and away games, you know, he's there every single week. I introduced Brad to football when he was 6. You know, taking him to Fulham games, home and away games because they were affordable, and they just aren't anymore. You know, you've got people talking about the fact that ticket prices are now cheaper to just go to away games than they are going to home games. If you are one of those people, please let us know your experiences of why that is in the chat section now, because I find that interesting that people that you know they make the financial decision that it's just too expensive to go to home games. I'd rather go to the odd away game, have more fun. You know, I know some people that decision is not even cost related. It's because they don't really want to be at home games, sat around tourists and people that don't really care about the club, which I completely
Yeah.
understand. You know, it's a frustrating one for most of us to sit by, and it's one of the many issues of what's going on at the moment. Now, for me, you know, I'm lucky in the set that I sit at the back of H4, and I've sat around my family and friends, everyone around me. I know it's been a season ticket. There's not been loads of sort of match day seats around us, but if I was sat in one of those sections where there are, it would bother me loads that there's just nothing but tourists in every single week. And I have nothing against people that you know support the club but can only get to games every now and then. You know, that's fair enough. That's a fair shout. That's a fair cop. It's the fact that the club now seem to be clearly marketing match tickets to people that aren't even Fulham fans, and we saw that heavily with the Man United game. I don't know about you, AJ, but you know the amount of ads I saw for that game still being on general sale up until the day before
Yeah.
when it sold out. It was sickening. Like, it was
Well,
genuinely just so frustrating.
we were still in the Metro full page every day until the Saturday. So the fact that they continue to pay whatever the premium is for that daily publishing right up until the Saturday morning shows that they're they're not they're not afraid to spend on marketing to sell these tickets at the price they want to sell them at. This, despite the fact if they knock the price by even a third or a quarter, then there'd probably be people more inclined to buy, and they wouldn't be having to spend money to make money.
Yeah, it's a bit of a frustrating one. And I think one of the major issues actually isn't even ticket pricing; it's the ticket category system. You know, one of the things I loved about how simple tickets used to be to buy at Fulham was when you used to get your little folder at the beginning of the season that used to tell you how much your season ticket was going to be. It would also have a breakdown of you know the category A, B, C, and D
Mm,
games that for the season, and you knew exactly how much a match ticket was going to be. You know, before the season even started, it didn't matter if we played Man United first game of the season or last game of the season at home. You knew exactly how much that match ticket was going to be because the category they were in and how much the club priced your section at that. That's gone
mm.
completely out of the window. You know, that doesn't even exist anymore, I don't think. And as far as I'm aware, you know, the club have actively decided that they're not using that, and we can tell this that they've moved to a dynamic pricing structure by the fact that there's no sort of link to how much game tickets cost. There's no, you can't really look at it and go, oh, West Ham cost this much, so Forest, who are probably in the same category as them, is going to cost this much. There's no correlation, and it's the most frustrating thing that it's literally a monopoly on, not a monopoly. It's literally a lottery, I should say, on how much a ticket's going to be for a certain game, and it
Mm.
gets really really hard to plan ahead of when you might be able to possibly bring a family member or bring anyone
Yeah.
to a game.
Cool.
How does that how do you find that works for you? Because obviously you if you want to come and say you have to look at travel and stuff like that. If you want to plan ahead to a game, you have to think about these things, and then
Yeah,
the club
well,
aren't really great at actually.
call me simple-minded, but why do we need to have any categories? Like a football game's a football game. Don't get me wrong. We're going to get more excited about a match between a local derby than we are against some random like Brighton or whatever it is. Fair enough, but the way the club categorizes it is they're always putting a high priority on these top six clubs, which frankly, as a Fulham fan, unless it's Chelsea, how often have you actually been interested in playing the Liverpools, the Man Cities? Like, realistically, take the recent form we've had against top clubs aside, which makes it somewhat entertaining to play them. From a typical standpoint, over the decades, those are the games you weren't excited for because you didn't think you'd get anything out of them, and 9 times out of 10 you wouldn't. It would be those mid-table fixtures. It would be those the teams in and around you. It would be those London derbies. And the fact that they're pricing them according to these top six clubs means that they're pricing them according to touts. They're pricing them knowing that they need to be sold. They'll be sold to touts. Touts will sell them outside the club for however much they sell them for, but they've made more money off of the touts. So it's just a bit, yeah, it gets me in all sorts of knots on why there even needs to be. You look at the sort of structuring of football in Germany, and they make very, very good money on their football. Like they're in a very good financial position. It's fan driven. It's yeah, you can all games, all season will be 15, 20 euros or whatever they are, and they fill up the stadium. Sure, people can then complain, oh, you can never get a ticket because they're always sold out. But as a football club, I can't think of a better way to have things, frankly. You're selling out what you've got, you're creating demand, and also having fans happy at the pricing structure. People then get excited that they can get a game once in a blue moon and go instead of going, oh crap, I, I'm spending £400 or £500 on one game away with my kids because it happens to be a category B game or whatever it is. It's a shambles, and that's that's a problem across the league, but especially at Fulham, where we just seem to want to completely milk our fan base at the moment.
Yeah, I agree to a certain extent of quite a lot of the stuff you're saying. For me, the old category system was the old dynamic pricing. It was them knowing that they could probably get away with charging 50 quid for a Fulham Man United ticket, whereas they wouldn't get away with that if it's Fulham, say Fulham Ipswich or Fulham Wigan or something like that.
Yeah,
So I understand that's why they had the category system in. It's absolutely fine. It then creates the supply and demand element. But the fact that the club have now gone on to even more aggressive approach, to even more, let's say, the American approach of
make it up
dynamic
as they go
pricing.
along.
Yeah, they're pretty much just charging what they want and as they want, and it's rather worrying as a fan to sit there and go, you know what, we have to look at the ticket pricing and go, like, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing when X amount of, YouTubers and social media outlets and news outlets are picking it up and they're commenting on how terrible it is that Fulham are basically bleeding their fan base dry. We've made videos on this as a channel before. We have one that I would suggest everyone go back and watch where we talk about, how much they are bleeding us and how much the actual money that's made by the price increases on match days actually makes the club on a yearly basis. Um, and what's quite funny to see the profit difference between the pricing structure now to the pricing structure a couple of years ago is still less than what they would have made if they finished 2 places above themselves in the league last year. So if we weren't on the beach at the end of February last year and finished a couple of places above ourselves, the ticket prices wouldn't have made a difference anyway. They wouldn't have,
Yeah.
that's where we are, and that's the most frustrating thing. And this is where we'll talk about it later when we talk about the transfer window and we talk about ambition and the pricing structure and how if we want to be a bit more ambitious, we're probably going to have to spend some more money. But realistically, where we are at the moment is where we are, and that's the frustrating thing. Ticket pricing is scary for an awful lot of people that aren't season ticket holders. People that go to away games all the time, will know that you have to budget to be able to do those things. It doesn't matter where you are in that sort of structure, you have to budget for those sort of things. I'm one of those people that, I did 17 years, Fulham home and away, with barely missing any single games. But since my family have got slightly older, I've not been able to go to that many away games anymore. So I only go to like 4 or 5 a season. But this year, it's only looking like I'm going to go to 2 or 3 away games this season because of just how much extra everything's costing. That's the biggest problem. Is there's a cost of living crisis out there. It's not just a cost of living or a cost of football crisis. It's literally everything is
Yeah.
costing more and more and more and more to do. And for a club that's meant to be a family club and is meant to notice those things, you think they would incentivize a little bit different than the way they are. But the problem is incentivizations aren't in their interest. What's in their interest is screwing over and sort of bleeding us as much as they can, and that's the problem that we've had. Let's go and quickly let's talk about away tickets this season. We know that football tickets are capped for away fans at 30 quid, right? Which is fine. It's great because you know exactly how much you're going to have to spend maximum on an away ticket. The problem with that
Hmm.
is that the club then play games like they did on Boxing Day, where they completely removed the loyalty points scheme for the biggest away game of the season, so that people who buy those tickets, those expensive tickets in the nice new lovely stand that don't go to away games could get tickets for away games. Basically, casting aside everyone who's travelled up and down the country for years for people that have not gone to an away game all season. That I can barely qualify for getting away tickets to certain away games anymore. I don't complain about it because I don't go to that many away games anymore. But I can tell you for sure, when I was in the middle of doing those 17 seasons of home and away perfect, home and away, if there was a game I couldn't get a ticket to because my loyalty would have deemed to be not good enough because they've removed the loyalty scheme, I would have been absolutely livid. I can understand exactly why it hurts so many people. I know from talking to 3 or 4 people, obviously after we had our episode where we spoke about, bleeding us dry, and it was around about the same time these Chelsea tickets came out on sale, that
Mm.
there were people that had been to every single away game this season that couldn't get a ticket direct at the time. And it's absolutely shocking that that should ever be the case. The ticket system at Fulham is a mess, and the problem is that you can't really ever go at the people that work in the ticket office. It's not them; they're not the ones making the decision. It's the people higher up that are making these ticket decisions. And I think one of the biggest problems for us is that ever since we've had, you know, Ali McIntosh become CEO, and ever since we've had the guy from the Jaguars also join the board and look at stuff like this, these ticketing decisions, these conversations between the club and the fans, even think little things like getting ticket information out to fans have become woefully poor. The amount of times people don't even see when tickets are becoming available. They don't see,
Yeah.
how much they're going to cost, how much the coach is going to cost to an away game because the club just don't publish it like they used to. Is absolutely shocking and it's frustrating, and I can understand why so many people are disillusioned to it. I don't know if you feel the same way.
Yeah, you'll see it in the metro before you see it on Twitter. And it's like, well, why am I seeing that this game has been advertised for sale, but I didn't know about it when I've got notifications turned on like 3 or 4 different social media platforms for your the official social media accounts. It's like, right, mm, do you or do you not want loyal fan sales? That evidently the answer's no. They want whoever has
Yeah.
got the deepest pockets.
Yeah, it's continuing to be one of the most frustrating things going forward, and I can understand when people are, looking at the people above, especially Alistair McIntosh. These are questions that are being asked, and the problem is, as we're about to talk about, these questions don't get spoke, they don't get answered, and we'll discuss why. Now, the next sort of category we want to talk about is the FST and FAB. Um, the Fulham Supporters Trust is, an integral part of being a Fulham fan. If you've not been a member of the FST, I've been an FST member for years. Sadly for me, I've seen the power or the ability to actually do stuff in the FST sort of getting smaller and smaller and diminishing all the time. The biggest problem is that now the FAB has come into place, and for those of you who aren't aware, the FAB obviously is
Have
something
they?
that was mandated. Yeah, the FAB was mandated by the new governance in football thing, where every single football team in the country has to have a fans advisory board. Now, as soon as the club realised that they could effectively hand pick who the people were going to be in the FAB, often we've all gone through the list of people that are in the FAB. I don't really know any of them. I know one or two, and I know they've handpicked one from the FST, and they've and stuff like that. They, they've diminished the power of the FST by doing so. Anyone who's read or seen any of the FST notes from their monthly meetings with the club over the last 6 months will see that there has been a really bad attitude coming back from the club around about to the FST, who are taking genuine concerns and issues from fans to the club, who are basically brushing them off and not answering them. The notes for the December meeting were laughable at that. We spoke about it in our sort of internal group chat, AJ, where Alistair McIntosh was asked 10 questions and he answered one. And the 9 he didn't answer, 5 he basically said, "Oh, you need to get the FAB to ask us a question." And the other 4 he sort of politicked his way out of not answering. And the only question he did actually answer was about why there's not champagne or prosecco in all areas of the ground.
Yeah,
And
we're
that
running
doesn't,
out of stock of champagne and prosecco or
yeah,
whatever it is. Yeah.
but that doesn't say what the problem is at the moment. I don't know what it is. The guy is rude. He is dismissive. He doesn't really care about how we feel as a fan base. And the biggest problem is you laughed and joked about the fact he made the comment about turning left on airplanes earlier on, but it's not the first time he's made comments like that. He
No.
passes off this thing about the fact that Fulham fans just seem to have a bit more than other football teams do in terms of being a bit more wealthy and a bit more to us. Well, it couldn't be any less true if they tried. I think the clubs sometimes forget that it doesn't matter that the football club is based in a really nice area of London. The fans are still working class. Us legacy
Mm.
fans, as they hate it being put, but it is the truth. Are still all working class people to mainly.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know about you, Jack, but my family are originally from Fulham and Putney,
Yep.
and
Same.
over the 6 generations as football fans, we've sort of slowly moved further. We've been gentrified out of the area.
Yeah.
Gentrifying's out.
You had the situation where council housing, if you were part of a council housing situation, could only be passed down to one generation, and after that, anyone after that would then get gentrified out. And then the same would happen in the next location. You'd get gentrified out again. The same would happen in the next location, and you just end up further and further out. I ended up in a position where by the time I was ready to move out, I was working, so I wasn't entitled to council support. So I ended up renting, which meant I was looking further out anyway because of the sheer cost of rental and being working class. So yeah, I'm born and bred in Fulham. I spent a large chunk of my childhood in Fulham, and then I moved to Brixton, Streatham, Bromley, and just kept moving further and further on. And eventually the cost of getting back into Fulham to see family or to go to Fulham games became more expensive. But at least at that point, I could bank on the tickets being for working class people. Now I've got the cost of getting there, the cost of the ticket, the cost of however much it's going to cost to get food and drink when I'm there. I mean, granted, the club has done some very nice bits to try and encourage fans to arrive early recently because of their new digital ticketing system that they wanted to make sure was working properly. But even with that, and I'm not going to sit here and complain about the difference between 50p and a pound and what have you, but those early doors prices for food and drinks very quickly went up over as the weeks went by, which I'm not going to complain about because it's still very, very cheap. Don't get me wrong. But if you're doing an offer, stick to an offer. If you get like, do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, yeah,
It,
no, I completely,
it's a difficult one. I don't want to moan about 50 pence, but like
yeah, no, I get it. But for me,
it's the 50 pence that turns into the 30 quids.
well, it literally just it truly emphasizes what we're going on about ticket prices, doesn't it? Because it's exactly what's
Yeah.
happened. They haven't just doubled in price overnight. They've crept up and they've crept up. Now, I want to make it clear that if you are a Fulham fan who has like more means than others, and it doesn't mean you're less welcome or you're not a Fulham fan because you're not working class or whatever. That's not what's being said, and it's important that that is known. That's not what's being said. The problem here is that it's a very much a problem with football these days. Not just Fulham; it's a football problem that people forget that it's a working class sport, and it's a working class problem that's going on. And we go back and we talk about the FST and the FAB. The FST is one of those things that the FST have been involved in some really important moments for us at Fulham Football Club. Anyone who was a member in the early
Mm.
'90s, when they were when they were helping raise money to save the club, to when they were running the Fulham 2000 campaign, where they were trying to help save the Stevenage Road stand in order to list the building so it couldn't be sold, so we didn't end up having to be moved out of our own home. They've
Fulham
tried to do
Rangers.
some work. Yeah, they've tried to do some work with the ticket prices over the last couple of years, and for some people that's not been met with the greatest of cheers, because for some people they want more affirmative action. But the FST have tried their best, and I
Yeah,
think that's one of the things that people have to look at.
yeah. To go on Paul's comment, are they dead? They're not dead. They're just muzzled at the moment, which is a bit unfair on them because they're doing what they can do, but they can't exactly be too affirmative because then the club will just stop having these meetings because they've got no obligation to do so now with the FST, where they will do with the new fan advisory board. So, unfortunately, as much as we want them to be affirmative and we want them to be strong and hard willed and fight for our case, if they push too hard, they just won't be allowed to talk to them at all, which makes it completely pointless.
That's spot on, really. And I think the biggest thing that people have to remember is that one of the most frustrating things that have come out of the last sort of sets of FST meeting notes is the fact that the club are basically saying if you have a problem, take it to the FAB. The FAB, who have had no active email address, no active website, and no active contact until I think a couple of weeks ago. So the fact that they were telling people
Yeah.
to take things to the FAB that you couldn't even take to the FAB says all it does, and it needed to, because they've been using, especially Alistair McIntosh has been using it as an excuse to not answer questions or to not actually listen to fans' concerns around little. It's not just ticket prices, it's things for like, you know, the toilets in certain stands, concessions in certain stands, the entrances in certain stands, the fact that there is away fans in home sections all the time that stewards do nothing about. These are all things that have been taken to the club by the FST, that the club have basically said, "Oh, you need to speak to the FAB, who would then bring it to us." There's no contact with the FAB, and that's been the problem. And again, this goes back to the fact that the genuine feeling from a lot of people, and I have to say mine is the exact of this, is that the FAB are just they yes men. None of us know, and I'm not saying I know every single Fulham fan, but I don't know anybody who's on that FAB board except from one
Hard,
person who is in the States, and the person who is the head of the FST, who's the person who's been told that you have to bring that too. The problem is with that is that the guy who runs the FST will 100% be behind every single Fulham fan. But how does one person have power in a room full of 12 people
Yeah.
rather than when you're the person who's actually bringing someone's concerns?
There's that, and you sit there and say about the FAB and what have you, but it's like, are they actually done anything yet? That's the thing. You don't get any meeting notes. You don't get any understanding of what they're doing, when they're doing it, how they're doing it. There's no meeting between the FST and the FAB, and then there's no understanding of what's going on there, at least from my perspective, because none of it's published to my understanding. If it is, I apologize, and please point me in the direction of those meetings. But from my understanding, they haven't done anything yet to be yes men. They're just there. You could, like, yes men obviously will sit there and bark up the club, but they're not barking up anything. They're not sitting there backing up the club for decisions the club is making. The club is making decisions, and then there's no voice.
Yeah, the biggest problem is that this goes back to yet another problem that people have with Alistair McIntosh. Alistair McIntosh has this nickname of Teflon Alistair, and the reason why is because he's managed to manipulate conversations to make Fulham fans look like they are a certain way, especially around we talk about us being better, slightly better off than we are. Sort of fans that turn left on aeroplanes, etc., etc. I know if anybody on the board of directors of the football club had made that comment during the 90s, they would have got chased out of the club
Mm.
because people wouldn't have accepted it. But it's sort of just brushed off now as it's a nothing comment, but it means a lot. That comment genuinely hurt my feelings because it was like you don't know our fan base at all. Yes, we have rich football fans. It's natural that we will. People that live in the area who decide, oh, I'm going to become a Fulham fan because they're on our
Every club
doorstep.
does. I'm sorry,
I,
every club does, but they're part of the one
I
percent.
don't,
They're not.
yeah, I don't have a
They're
problem
not,
with
they're
that. My
not the
problem
majority.
is they brush it. And we've seen it, and this is where it goes a bit deeper in conversations where anyone who's listened to the Khan speak, especially Shad Khan speak around about the fans, you would have heard him last year mention the fact that Fulham fans are a higher education, a higher base. And you sat there and you're like, no, we're really not. We're not better than anybody else.
No,
I know we do this thing on days where we sort of take the mick out of ourselves, oysters and champagne on a train and, charcuterie boards here and there. But yeah, we're allowed to make those jokes. We're allowed to mock ourselves and say that, yeah, like this is who we are. And the reason why we do it is not because it's who we are, it's because we know it winds every other fan base up.
yeah,
You can't go through those Saturdays where those pictures are shared on Twitter without like literally seeing rattled Northerners all over the place, right?
you've got
And it's
the bloke.
funny and it's fine when we do it, but the
Yeah,
club using it as a way of saying, "Oh, this is a justification for us to act the way we are," is a real concern.
yeah, you've got the bloke doing that, having worked 6 days of the week on a building site, and then throwing his eyes off, buying Tesco's finest to take the piss and post it on Twitter. It's not realistic, because realistically, like, the high end people either aren't going to away days because they've got a box the um at the home grounds that they'll attend, and it's very unlikely they'll be going to Newcastle away, or what's a really far away one, like those. Yeah,
Newcastle's far enough.
yeah, exactly. Newcastle's far enough. Like, realistically, like, the people that are really in that 1% might be taking a private jet up there because they happen to charter one. They're not going to be posting pictures about it on Twitter. Like, when we take the mick of how we are going up to away days and showing off flashy food, it's because it's an ironic joke. We're not this way inclined, but for some reason everyone thinks we are. So we'll lean into the joke. That's what it is. It's just the same way. It was the same way with the Clappers. Everyone sat there and mocked us for being Clapper FC, and every time we beat them, you just got beat by the Clappers, mate. You got beat by Clapper FC. We leaned into the joke because it's the best way to be.
Yeah, it's it's just one of those things that are adding more and more to the frustration. When we sit there and we talk about the FST and the FAB, you know, I know obviously Paul's just asked, is the FST dead? And you sort of answered, it's not dead. No, it's not. 100% it's not. I'm still an FST member. I sort of suggest anyone who's watching, you think about joining the FST, because the more of us that are there, the more say we have, and the more powerful our voice becomes. But as it is at the moment, it is a worrying sign about where they're heading by the fact that the club seem to be hiding behind a non-contactable FAB, one that we've seen do absolutely nothing at the moment. And it is of a slight concern, because we want the club to grow. We want the fans' problems to be addressed and to be heard, and they're not. And this is what all adds to the the legend and the issue that people have with Alistair McIntosh, because he tends to be the face of those meetings from the football club point of view, and the fact that he is the face of those meetings, and he tends to be the one who gives nothing responses, or gives responses that are a bit, they feel a bit condescending sometimes. I don't know if you agree with that, but they do feel a bit condescending. And because of that, we really, really struggle in terms of actually, getting anywhere, and is a concern. But I stand by the FST. I will stand by the FST for as long as I can do, because they've done amazing things for us as a fan base over the years. But there has to be a way that the FST and the FAB can collaborate and work together, and actually, make a difference for us fans. Because the biggest problem with the FAB is they are not accountable for anything. But they stop at Alistair McIntosh, so he can control their narrative and he can control what they are doing, and that is a real concern. Where the FST don't represent the football club, they represent us. And so we have to get behind them, support them. And I know that there'll be people watching this, or people that will watch this in the future, that will be annoyed about the softy approach it feels like they took over the last sort of demonstrations with the yellow cards and stuff like that. But you know they're only trying to drum up support and to drum up an actual show of, this is our issue. And when we look at next steps and stuff like that, people talking about protesting and
Yeah.
stuff like that, this is the sort of thing that they're trying to get together. You don't go straight for the jugular with those things. You have to build them up, and that's exactly what they're trying to do. And one of the biggest problem is that, I'm not trying to sound condescending to younger Fulham fans here. Uh, a lot of younger Fulham fans want to go straight for the jugular in terms of storming the pitch and stuff like that, and you can't do that. And I understand that. I understand the anger and the want and the need to make your point of view said. But genuinely, is it worth getting yourself a 3 to 5 year match day ban just so you can make an argument about ticket prices? No.
Yeah,
When Fulham fans have stormed the pitch in the past, it's been because the club are dying, and there was nothing to lose by storming the pitch, because the club weren't going to be there at the end of the season. So it's a bit of a difficult one. And I don't know if you agree with that.
yeah, and even in the case of, even if we were to band together and storm the pitch, you got about a third of the ground that will do it, and realistically, that's because the other 2/3 have already been bought out and are no longer the hard-working match day fans that we all want to be and say we are, and it's getting quite a depressing state. And realistically, it's what puts us in such a difficult position to plan things like match strikes, because we can all sit there and go on strike, and then they'll just sell our tickets for 180 quid a pop to tourists, claim that they've sold out, and then it won't make any sense to the media, where we've got this band of thousands of fans outside the stadium striking against ticket prices for a sold out game. It makes us look less like, how do I best explain this? Like, yeah, I suppose a walkout could be a better solution, because then we're there, we've taken the seats, and then we walk out and show it. But at the same time, they've taken our money, so ultimately they're
Yes.
still the ultimate winner. So it's a tough one.
Here's my view on the walkout. Walkouts for me are actually genuinely where I think the next logical step is.
Yeah,
Because
probably.
it would be a case of, but it would need season ticket holders who are in that category of, they're still comfortably season ticket holders, and they probably will be a season ticket holder next year. Going, I need to stand by my fellow Fulham fans here and also walk out. If we're to do
Mm,
something like a walkout, realistically, it needs to be done at the right time. So it needs to be done at a game that's, potentially on TV. It needs to be done at a time where, the club will get the most embarrassment out of it actually happening. We tried to do something last year during the FA Cup game that was on TV, and we all knew what was going on behind the scenes. All the Fulham fans talking on Twitter and everyone. We all knew what we were doing by boycotting the game. We all know that that message managed to get to ITV, who mentioned the fact that Fulham fans were boycotting the game, and then you could tell that the club had got to ITV about it, and they made a statement about it at half time that felt a bit wishy washy and sort of walked over it like it wasn't really an issue, and it wasn't true. So if we do
mm,
a walkout, which I do genuinely believe is probably the next smartest step, and from listening to other people talk, I think it's the next logical step for other people too. It needs to be done at a time when it makes sense, and we need a moment where all Fulham fans and all season ticket holders come together on this. And it's hard if you're one of those people buying a match ticket for that one game alone, and I'd appreciate that,
yeah.
because you're not going to spend 100, you're not going to spend 100 quid to walk out on 40th minute. But if you're a season ticket holder, you have to look about doing that. We've seen this week alone, if any of you caught the 606 phone conversation and the phone in that came in, where we had Chris, who very eloquently put Fulham fans' point of view across, and he very did a really good job of talking about how frustrating we are and how angry we are about the way things are going off the pitch, because we're in this really weird moment at the moment where on the field everything's going great. We're having a great season. We're all loving the product that we have. We all love the manager we have. We love the squad that we have. You know, barring a few holes here and there. But the off the field stuff is really, really starting to put a dampener on that. And then
Yeah.
that was met by another phone call 45 minutes later on the 606 by a lovely Fulham fan called Kamal, who then spoke about, basically gave his interview back, which all I got from it was, I'm all right. I can afford my season ticket. I don't get why everyone's complaining. I remember when we used to play in the fourth division and got a couple of thousand people. Now in the Premier League, people should just stop complaining and crack on. Which to me, and I made this point on our Twitter page the other day, is the biggest load of bull that anyone can speak. It is the worst type of "I'm all right, Jack, so don't worry about everybody else" sort of comment that a Fulham
Don't
fan
drag
can
me
make.
into this.
I think it's the biggest type of bull that you can speak. And this whole comparison, we used to be rubbish and we used to pay Port Vale and we used to, lose the teams that are in the fourth division. So therefore, we should just be happy to be charged what we're being charged now. The club being in the Premier League or being a Premier League mainstay compared to being in the third and fourth division isn't justification for them taking the mick and taking fans for a ride now. And I think that's the thing that has to be addressed. The club
It's the
have to
opposite. It's the
realise that.
opposite. It's our support during those times we were playing Port Vale and playing Mickey Mouse teams here and there and getting 110 people to an away game and stuff like that. Like those are the times where our fan dedication dragged the club from being nothing, and the reason we still exist today and we push and get further and game and things improve. It's not like if we got relegated tomorrow and ended up where we were the season after the Khans bought the club, where we were almost double relegated, they would be banking on us. They'd be bringing back the kids for a quid. They'd be charging us 25, 30 quid for midweek home games because they'd want us there to make sure that we pushed this squad to perform. But because we're mid-table Premier League, they're not buying players that are being asked to be bought. They're not. They're not backing fans and giving us reasonable pricing, and they frankly don't give a toss anymore. And it's just like, right, pick and choose when you want our loyalty, basically. just taking us for a
Yeah,
ride, uh, taking advantage of us. And as was said in that 606 call, when I think it was the 606 call, it might have been a different, maybe a talk sport interview or something like that. But we're not going to just turn away and become. No, it was actually in Parliament. We're not going to go and become Brentford fans just because the season tickets are cheaper. We have a loyalty to our club, and that loyalty is being exploited.
yeah, that was Tom Gatrix who was talking
Yeah,
at the
thank
time
you.
from the football supporters trust. So not just Fulham fans, but the whole of football. They're in Parliament at the moment. Because we all know that ticket pricing and fan loyalty is a much wider issue than just at Fulham Football Club at the moment.
Yeah.
But there was a point very well made by him. You know, banking on people's loyalty to mean that you can basically take the mick out of them only leads to one thing, and that's contempt. And you don't want people hating the football club that they love. It's one of those really weird things that we will talk about it in a second when we sort of talk on the transfer window, where we know that if the club wants to be ambitious, which is something that we all want, they need to raise money, which is fine, right? Which is
Mm,
fine. But there's ways you can go about it. And the problem with me is if the club do the things they were meant to do well and they still had to raise ticket prices, you wouldn't probably complain as much. But the club do things that make no financial sense whatsoever, and then they still do that. We all know that when they built this lovely new football stand, that it probably meant that the average Fulham fan was going to get priced out of it, and every single one of us made that comment about that's fine. You want to leave the new Riverside stand for the people that can afford the luxury of what it is, but you have to make sure that the three other stands stay at a price that people can afford to pay and actually go.
mm.
Which is one of the issues that we have seen that hasn't been the case. And when it comes to the club doing stuff like that, well, let's how about we try to make sure that we give the manager a squad on the pitch that means he can finish higher up the table because every single position we finish in the league above each other is worth 2 million quid to the team. How
Yeah.
about we concentrate on making the most out of the players that we sell, youth players that we sell that never seem to make it through to the first team? Because we don't seem to do well with that. Other than Jay Stansfield this season, which let's be honest, we all wanted Jay to stay, but you couldn't turn down £20 million for a player like Jay because it's very unlikely he'll be worth that in 4 or 5 years' time, and you understand that, right?
Yeah.
But the problem is, as much as there is a Jay Stansfield about, there has been countless amount of players before him that have been sold for nothing because the club don't get them down the contracts early enough or don't get them signed on quick enough. We're looking at the moment, we have 6 players in the first team at the moment whose contracts are up at the end of the season. And it leaves us all in an air of, you know, what's going on. And it doesn't help the squad and it doesn't help the team and it doesn't help the fans feel like there's an actual plan going forward. And it concerns a lot of us. You look at, Alistair McIntosh and you look at the conversations he has around certain things and you get concerned. You look at Marco Silva and the way that he speaks about things. He said at the beginning of January we needed 2 extra players. Those 2 extra players haven't come. I don't have a problem. We'll talk about transfers now. This transfer window, we've signed one senior player and he hasn't even signed yet. We haven't had any confirmation that Willian has signed. And
Replace a
we
35-year-old Willian with a 36-year-old Willian.
yeah, that's exactly it. This is the problem. And we said it. I said it on my Twitter page the other day. The club are showing no ambition in the transfer window there. And I know there's some people that argue that January isn't a time to show ambition. It's a time to fix holes in the squad. Well, we haven't done that either.
Mm.
Signing a 36-year-old, unless Willian over the last 6 months has decided, you know what, I'm going to become a right back. we haven't fixed squad holes. You
No.
know, we haven't fixed the problems that we have. Forget the fact that Harry Wilson injured himself 2 weeks ago. Forget the fact that Nelson's back in a couple of weeks, hopefully. You know, Marco said on the 1st of January, "I need 2 players," and he hasn't been given them. And we go through this thing every single transfer window with Fulham, where we seem to wait until the last minute to do any business, and it's frustrating during the summer because it shows no ambition. and it shows no actual coherence in who we're trying to sign, because we're just trying to get the cheapest deal physically possible for anybody who might slightly fit the bill but will save us a few quid. But it means that, we're often going into the start of the season without the squad that are actually playing games. We have to wait 4 or 5 games into a season before we've actually got a squad that we know that Marco is actually happy with. And that's frustrating too. Jack, how do you feel about the transfer window? Let's talk about the one we've just gone through. Obviously, just finished yesterday, well, Monday, and then look at the one in in the preset. Like, how do you feel about that when it's over? Because I'm just filled with frustration about the way that it goes.
I see. I used to sit there and really, really enjoy transfer deadline days. I used to tune in to them, make sure I had Sky Sports News on, even if I was at work. It would be on all day. I'd hear the same transfer 16 times because that's what Sky Sports News do. But I'd hear any breaking news, and I'd hear any breaking news about Fulham. It's the one day of the year that I would typically turn on the notification bell for the Fulham Twitter account so that I got a notification for every single one of their tweets and not just the ones with media, just so I knew what was happening when it was happening. I used to try and dig up information from inside sources at the club. I remember when we signed Harrison Reed and Bobby Decordova Reed, I was told, and I posted it 2 hours before we signed them, that we were signing Reed. And I was told it was Winston Reed because we were in desperate need of a centre back at the time. I got the wrong Reed, but we ended up with 2 Reeds anyway. It was just like, it's really, really exciting stuff. But it was few and far between nowadays because when we do business, it's not the business we need to do. And then the other side of the coin is we just don't do any business, which is like, as you said, we sold Jay Stansfield. The point of selling him was making a huge amount of a dent in this in the amount that we're allowed to spend compared to what we're not in the what's it called? Too many abbreviations today. I've got my mind all messed up.
Oh, yeah, the financial fair play, FFP.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
PSR.
PSR. That's it. Sorry, so many abbreviations today has had me completely scrambled. Yeah, the PSR stuff. It's like we're in a great position. Arguably one of the better ones in the league going into the January transfer window to say we could actually spend a little bit of money compared to the rest of the league. Man City are Man City. They will always spend until the 115 charges either come hitting them like a ton of bricks, or they get away with a lot of them. We'll wait and see. All of the other clubs, for the most part, have to be careful of what they are and aren't spending. But even that hasn't stopped some of them doing good business. Aston Villa had to be careful because of their financial situations. So they sold a player to Saudi who was very important to them. But it then meant that they could get the likes of Marcus Rashford on loan, paying him over 200 grand a week, which is just absurd for a club like Aston Villa, who a few seasons ago were in the Championship. So, realistically speaking, there's a club with ambition. There's a club pushing to do the very best they can do with the very best that they've got. They've got a manager in similar ilk to Marco Silva in the sense of a manager that brings the best out of players. He's obviously a much higher caliber than Marco on paper based on what he's won. I'm not here sitting comparing their trophy cabinets, but what I am saying is that both are very good at dragging the most out of players that wouldn't necessarily always perform as well as they do. Both managers are very, very good at that, and we'll probably see a reignition of the Marcus Rashford we're used to seeing under Emery because that's what he does. In saying that, and the point I'm trying to make is that there's a club with ambition. They're not afraid to spend money to make money. They're not afraid of pushing the boat out and getting Champions League damn football. A, a club we played in the playoff final and beat and got into the Premier League are now playing Champions League football. and competing for another place in Europe this season. And everyone will go, yeah, it's because Aston Villa, they're a bigger club than Fulham. But they weren't a few years ago. That's the thing. We had the same starting point. We had a head start on them. The difference is we're not putting in the ambition to sit there and accomplish these goals because we've got that we're little old Fulham mentality. And our board back that mentality and go, we're a little old Fulham, but their fans are posh, so we'll rip them for money. Instead of like pushing the boat out and going, it doesn't matter how big the stadium is or how full the fan base is from a international perspective, or even what trophies you've got in your history, like Aston Villa essentially do, which is what gives them that big title branding. Winning trophies 20, 30, 40 years ago is tremendous stuff. Well done to them. But we could be winning trophies tomorrow. We could, well, not necessarily, not tomorrow, but we could be winning trophies next year if you put in the ambition to do so. Newcastle, another good example. They're pushing to actually win a trophy. I don't know what the score is right now, but last I heard, they were 1-0 up in the cup and pushing for a place in the. They're 2-0 up now. They're 2
Game's
0
just
up.
finished. Game's just finished. They won 4-0.
Wow, there you go. So they've got a 4-0. They won on a 4-0 aggregate, and they've got a place in a cup final. A team we beat on the weekends are in a cup final. We're sitting here gloating about the fact that we beat them in the league, which because we keep dropping points to the likes of Ipswich, even Manchester United, who performed awfully, because we keep dropping points there because we're not ambitious and we haven't filled the squad with what we need to fill it with. Like, we're not going to be competing in any European trophies or in any other major trophies. And God forbid that, well, not even God forbid, please prove me wrong and go on this tremendous cup run. I'd love to see it, but I don't have my hopes up. That's my
Yeah,
rambling. That's my rambling.
no, no.
I'll push back to you.
So
But
the thing is for me with transfers, right, is that we're not even doing the basics, which is replacing players that we've sold and we've
mm,
made money on. We sold Alexander Mitrovic 3 years ago for big money.
it's been
We
3 years
replaced him.
already. Jesus.
Well, we were 2.5. We replaced
Yeah.
him with a cheap Rail who's turned out to be decent, but he's not Mitrovic. You know, we failed to replace him. We failed to replace him. It's simple as that. We haven't replaced Mitrovic since he's been gone. Where did that money go? And yes, I know that we signed Iwobi that summer, but Iwobi didn't even touch the sides on the money that we made on Mitrovic.
No.
Last year we sold Paulinho, and yes, we spent £20 million on Sander Berg, but that still doesn't touch the sides on the money that we got for Paulinho.
We could have spent 20
Uh,
million anyway. It's
yeah,
there's
and then you
not
look at
depends.
Jay Stansfield being sold for 20 million now because he's come from our academy. Uh, you look at the fact that realistically, I think PSR meant it was on at £62 million we could potentially spend because of that £20 million that we made in because it's pure profit
Yeah.
on a youth player. We haven't spent any of it. Instead, what we've done is we brought Willian back for his third spell at the club. And don't get me wrong, I've got no problem with signing Willian. You know, I've loved him every time I've seen him play for Fulham in the 2 times we signed him. And if Marco thinks he fits the team, then, you know, in Marco we trust, we go with that. But signing a 36-year-old you let go as a 35-year-old 6 months ago is an ambition. It isn't. Because if it was that ambitious for him to Willian to be in a Fulham shirt, we would have done all we could to keep him at the beginning of the season and not let him go off to Greece. So it's frustrating and it's anger inducing, and we have to look at it like that. That no, we haven't shown enough ambition. I know there'll be people watching and people listening that will go, you know, but the club need to make money in order to be more ambitious, and that's why the ticket prices are rising. We think that they can't rise the ticket prices, but still not show ambition and still show ambition. And what you're meant to do? Well, the problem is the fact that they aren't just rising ticket prices; they are skyrocketing ticket prices, and we still are showing no ambition. If
Yeah.
Fulham went and signed Marcus Rashford, and I'm not saying that we could, and I'm not saying that we have the money because he would have been paid 100 grand more than any other player who plays for the club. But if Fulham had gone and signed Marcus Rashford and then gone, oh, this is why I was talking about to rise ticket prices in order to pay a player of that caliber to come to the club, you could probably not justify it, but go, yeah, fair enough. But we haven't. And we haven't done for 3 years. And the last 3 years is when we've seen ticket prices and match day prices genuinely just go up and up and up and up. And this is where it's become a real problem.
Like,
You
yeah,
know,
I'd struggle a lot more and a lot more to argue with these ticket prices going up and pricing us out of games if we were in Aston Villa's position. Like that's the situation I would demand from the club, to sit there and go, yeah, okay, this is why we're raising these ticket prices to 160 quid a game to play Manchester United, because at that point we're playing Champions League football. We'll get 45, 50 quid Champions League tickets and also away days to Europe. It's like, yeah, okay, cool. You milk the games you can milk in that situation. We're not in that situation because we don't reinvest the money. Like, we had loads and tons of speculation, but that they were milking the transfers of our sold players because the owners were looking to sell the club. But I don't know if that's true or not. And if it is, when is it happening? Because frankly, I need someone to come in and actually treat this like a football club, because it's not happening at the minute.
yeah. Let's look. We only wanted to be on here for an hour, but we'll just reach the last sort of topic that we wanted to speak about, mainly because of the question that Paul's just sent in. And Paul, thank you very much for interacting so much in the show today. It's been helpful that
We do
we've
appreciate it, mate.
managed to do it.
Thank you very much.
Is it all on Ali Mack? Now, here's the thing, right? We have to be open and we have to be honest in the conversation. Ali Mack is getting an awful lot of the brunt of fans' frustration, mine included. You know, I have to be the one who puts his hand in the air and go, I made the meme that everyone keeps sharing about, you know, he doesn't like us and we don't like him and get out of our club, because that's how I genuinely feel. Ali Mack gets an awful lot of the anger based in him. And the reason for that is not just because he's the CEO of Fulham, but he's the face of the football club. He's the day to day face of the football club. The Khans, whether that be Shad or Tony, they're not here. You know, and we've all heard rumours of them, you know, potentially trying to sell up. And for me personally, you know, I've sort of felt like Shad sort of stopped really paying attention to us ever since he realised he couldn't buy Wembley. Um, uh, and you know, the new stand sort of became a bit of a hindrance more than anything else. It becomes a frustration. It becomes a ongoing thing that Animac will be continuing to be the person who will be the face of everyone's frustration, because he's the face of the football club. I don't think it's too far off people turning around now and saying, you know what, maybe we just need to throw anger at all three of them. You know, maybe not Tony so much, because there's only so much you can do as, you know, the owner's son. And I know he's that one of the directors and stuff like that, but you know, he
He
doesn't
has
really
a
have
stake.
much to do with the day to
He
day
has
running of the
stake
football
in the
club.
club as well. He has a. I don't know how much his ownership stake is, but he does have an
Yeah,
ownership stake in the club.
but it
So
gets to
there
the
is an
point
argument.
where you have to sit there and say, at what point as a fan club, as a fan base, do we say, actually, we need new ownership, not just new directors, not just a new board, because there becomes a point when a time where the anger goes from being just on the board and it goes to being on the owners and the board, and I don't think it's that far off, to be absolutely honest with you. You know, the disinterest that sometimes feels that comes from the ownership is anger inducing. It is. But Annie Mac will be the one who gets the anger at the moment, because he's the one there today, day to day, making day to day decisions. He's also the one there day to day responding to things in a way that is almost derogatory towards Fulham fans. You know, comments about turning left on aeroplanes and us you know, being of a different caliber to certain other fan bases, and you know, stuff like that is not going to help his relationship with, you know, most day to day Fulham fans, because that's not who we are. You know, we've had this
Yeah,
discussion already. You know, for me, Paul, I think that uh, is it all on Ali Mac? No, it's not all on Ali Mac, but he will continue to get the brunt of it at the moment, because he has the ability to change the way he's doing things. And I understand that, you know, from the job he's in, he's probably in a position where he's only getting judged on the amount of money that comes into the books and not necessarily how the fans feel about it. And that'll be the argument that many people have made about him in the past. And I understand that. The problem is that if you keep only worrying about the bottom line, what will happen is you'll run the fan base away, and you'll have a
Yeah,
situation where hypothetically, it's not even hypothetically, when we get relegated again, because it will happen. Um, where are the fans going to come from? 'Cause it's all well and good selling
yeah,
tickets to tourists and day trippers. They have no interest in the championship. As much as I love the championship, as much as many of us liked being part of the championships for the entertainment it was as the league. And I had this argument with someone the other day that I would much rather be valued as a football fan and watch us play in League One than feel like I'm being pushed out and not appreciated and still be in the Premier League. And I stick by that
yeah,
because it's Fulham Football Club I love, not the bottom line and how much money it makes. So
yeah.
it's a frustrating one. How do you feel about, before we wrap up, mate? How do you feel about it? And do you blame Ali at all, or is it everyone's fault?
I don't think that all the blame needs to go on Ali Mack, but we're looking at it in the wrong way if we're sitting there playing the blame game. It's being pushed towards Ali Mack because he's the button we need to press to get the lights to turn on upstairs. It's it's quite literally he is our channel through to the Khans or the rest of the board of directors in order to make footballing based decisions. It needs to go through the CEO as it would do with any business. If you needed to interact with a board of directors, a financial institution, you go through the proper channels, which ends up leading to the CEO first. Whether that's through advisory boards, whether that's through support channels, it all ends up back onto that CEO first before it then goes up into the directors. So yes, Ali Mack is getting a lot of brunt at the moment, but that's because he's equally responsible for some of the decisions that have been made, and his public voice is that against what the fans believe. Without his interviews, without his public statements, he would just be a means to directing our frustrations, and he would get less of the brunt personally. But there is a combination of a personal attack on him, as well as there is fan frustration of the state of the football club because of his statements backing the board decisions. Unfortunately, it's a bit of a similar situation to that of early Tony Khan when they don't know just when to shut up and do their job. If he was just quiet, did his job, and these prices were an issue, we would be complaining about it just as we are now, but there wouldn't be any personal attack on Ali Mack as a character or as a figurehead for the football club because he's just a guy doing his job and we have to use him as a means to raise the issues further up the food chain. So it's a combination of the two. I don't think Ali Mack is entirely to blame for everything because he doesn't do all of the jobs at the club. The transfers, for example, that we complained about, Tony Khan is involved in those as well as a bunch of other people that were not named and we might not necessarily know all the names of. But that doesn't change the situation of when it doesn't go wrong, we point those frustrations at the figurehead that we can do. Which for transfers, we normally uh, vent our frustrations towards Tony Khan. For club-related financial decisions, we vent our frustrations towards the CEO. For your hot dog being cold, you vent your frustrations at the lady that gives it to you at the stand. You vent your frustrations in the right directions. And unfortunately for Ali Mack, he's made his job harder by choosing not to remain professional, frankly.
Yeah, but it's funny because the three names of the directors that everyone should know, right? Obviously, it's Alistair McIntosh, who's CEO, and then we have Mark Lamping, who's the non-executive director, who's the guy who is basically he's Jaguars guy. He's not a Fulham guy. He's a Jaguars guy. He works closely with Shad Khan in the sports industry, and he trusts him, so he's at Fulham. And then the last one is obviously David Daly, who's been at Fulham for years now. Came over from Nike, and the big difference between why David Daly and Mark Lamping, not just because they're not CEO, like he doesn't get. We don't shout sack the board where the frustrations coming at just Ali Mack is because of the comments he makes and the fact that he seems to use really weird justifications for decisions that are being made by the club. This is one of those things that we can talk about for hours and hours, and we probably will. And there probably will be more of these live shows coming up where we want interaction with people to let us know stories about how stuff are going, because it is what it is with this. We made an ambition when we started Ful-on to sort of talk about things that weren't just match day results. We want to talk about wider issues at Fulham, and this is exactly why we want to do that. And we want people to interact with us. We do it, and we appreciate everyone who has watched and checked in and checked out or whatever tonight. And Paul, again, we appreciate you for sharing. Anyone who is watching, please subscribe and like to the channel, comment, share it with amongst Fulham mates. It is an important conversation that we keep having and we keep pushing. We endeavor as a channel to not shy away from issues that aren't always easy to speak about, because we want to make sure that we do it. So as I say, subscribe, like, and comment, share with all your mates. We'll see you all if you're watching this now on Friday as we preview the Wigan FA Cup game over the weekend. If not, we'll see you all
Where I get
soon.
proven wrong, and we go on this
Yeah,
tremendous cup run.
yeah. We'll see how that goes. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. We really do appreciate it. We'll see you all soon. Come on, you whites.
I mean, you're right.